Hey guys, I'm Chris.
And I'm Mike.
Wait. No. You're not Mike. You are Daddy Mike, Daddy Teeny. Welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Mitrap podcast. Big news, guys. Big news.
The Double Daddy podcast. You got two dads talking into your ears on these microphones here tonight for the first time in podcast history.
First time in No Limits podcast history. Two dads. You need to get on my level though. You're only at one, but you'll get there eventually. Yeah, sorry we haven't posted this second part of the pod. Mike's been very busy.
Oh yeah,
I've been busy too, but Mike's been
although
even more
I was
busy
not
than
the
me,
reason
so.
we canceled our our recording 2 weeks ago. Just gonna put that out there. I was gonna record like 2 days before the baby came, but
Yes, I had an unfortunate work trip that I had to go to Europe, and I had to wine and dine with my colleagues, and so the 7-hour time difference that's really
It was
bad.
tough.
It's tough.
Yeah.
So especially with you working.
Yeah.
So anyways, we're here now. We've saved a lot of our takes. Obviously, if you haven't listened to our part one, let me back up. We're talking about Don Bentley, first book, Vince Flynn, Capture, Kill. If you haven't listened to part one, pause it, go back, listen to part one. I think you'll listen to us and hear we greatly enjoyed the first half of this book, and I'm super excited to get into the second half of this book. I think there are definitely highs, definite lows. I don't quite know where this book falls for me. It's not. I'm just going to say off the bat, it's definitely not low tier, but I don't know where it fits in the overall story. And I think part of that is Don's decision to put this book in a historical context by doing this. Is it a prequel? Is it technically a prequel? Is it just inserting in the timeline?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very strange. But yeah, super excited to get your feedback on the second half of this book.
Absolutely. And I mean, like you said, we might have a little bit of a different flair, a different flavor than we did in part one. I'm still really high on this book. Like you're saying, when we rank it, that's going to be tough. In my mind, this one could totally be up there, towards the top end of things. It could also kind of slip into the middle of the pack. So I'm not totally determined on where I sit with the book in the end. I think a lot of things you and I hash out here tonight might clean up some of my hesitations or issues that I had. But there are also some absolutely glaring problems staring me in the face after reading this book, and I can't ignore them. And a couple of them, which we'll get to, I have a fire burning inside me right now. A couple of them are so bad, dare I say, unforgivable. Possibly
unforgivable.
Unforgivable.
I'm going to push back on that. I'm going to try to say, when we get to them, I'm going to say that there's some things we can take from these.
Sure.
And I don't know, overall, super happy with this book. Super happy with with his first pass at trying to tackle this. And I guess just diving right into it, I think, what do you think of the choice of deciding to do this quote unquote prequel?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. I was nervous. We said that on part one. We said that on this pod.
We said that on all the pods we did, when it was announced.
It could have been a strange thing. And I see the occasional Facebook post on Mike and Ash. What's he doing here? Thought he was dead. Is this new author really changing the series and just undoing things? So sure, there's some confusion out there. Are they probably your very tangential readers who don't keep up with the social media and the blog posts and the emails? Probably. Are they going to read the book? Yes. Those minor confusions, I feel like, are just, par for the course. It's going to happen. It's no big deal. I thought the bigger problem could be, if this thing falls through, we now have got this curveball that exists in the series that we kind of want to ignore, but you can't ignore. And that's not the case at all.
No.
It slots in very, very well. And that's one of the biggest winners of this book, is that Don swung for the fences, did something he was passionate about. Oh, and by the way, when we get there, my rants that are incoming, that I am tabling for now at your request, they have nothing to do with Don. I will say I think it's a wider kind of thing slipping through the cracks beyond one author writing the story. There are kind of some other things going on influencing them that I think allowed the problem to happen. So they're not squarely on Don. But Don's choice to put the book where he saw best and he thought a story was missing and he felt in his bones, he said, what was Rapp doing during the bin Laden raid? Like, what
It's a
was he
great
doing
question.
after Irene Kennedy got captured, tortured, and he saved her? We can't just move on from those two things, pretending like those couple of years just like didn't have a massive impact on who these characters were and their careers. You know, they're both committed to this country, protecting and defending it, to throw that in there. And these major events happen. A CIA director is kidnapped. You can even throw in extreme measures, right? They attack Capitol Hill, a few restaurants, and
Yep.
the NCTC. There are successful terrorist attacks. Bin Laden's still on the loose. We got him. How could you not have Irene Kennedy and Mitch Rapp responding to that? I would have never really considered that. And Don did. And he said, I'm going to tell that story. Boldly walked into it. Now, the Bin Laden stuff. When there's a particular scene, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but when Mitch Rapp plays Cable Guy or Electric Meter Maid, when Mitch Rapp's the meter maid and he gets into the compound and Noreen's thing fails and they're going to abduct Noreen inside the compound, I was like, is this really what we're doing here? That whole sequence felt forced just to say, we've got to get Mitch into a bada bed. We got to have him doing something with the Bin Laden raid. And to me, I'm thinking, oh shit, we're going to change the whole story. You know, the SEALs, the nighttime operation, the choppers crossing the border, in the Situation Room, that little conference room where everyone, you know, you remember Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and the whole cabinet, essentially, the whole national security team watching the video feed. I'm like, are we just going to pretend that whole thing didn't happen and instead Mitch Rapp is the only one who can save the day and get Bin Laden? I was like, are we really going there? And then Don
Pulls a 180.
Perfectly pulls a 180. And honestly, one of my favorite things about the book is how that's tied into the Ashani storyline with the Quds Force and their capabilities to basically put shoulder-fired, heat-seeking nighttime missiles that can lock onto American choppers into Afghanistan. That being tied into Mitch Rapp needing to save the day to protect the SEALs going in to get Bin Laden, and doing that in the shadows. There is nothing more Mitch Rapp than him saving the day in the shadows, protecting at the last second the SEALs on those choppers
and
so that they can get Bin Laden. And nobody knows. And
Yep.
him and Irene and Stan are the only ones in the world. And Derek, the helicopter pilot, who's a G,
awesome.
they're the only people in the world who know that Mitch did that. It's the most Mitch Rapp thing ever. And I was nervous Don was going to have him infiltrate the compound, kill Bin Laden himself, and undo the whole history. And instead, everything came together. And that final sequence was just a fun ride. It saved the Bin Laden stuff. It slotted in perfectly to where Mitch, Irene, Mike Nash all are at this point in the universe. Don, hats off to you to pull that off. That's perfect. And that is a genius, brilliant move. And I was nervous about it, but he did it.
Yeah, and I think something that I said before on a pod when we first found out the plot was I was trying to grapple with why would you choose to do this, right? And part of my reasoning was, well, you can choose to go after both Kyle and Vince. And Kyle has obviously taken Mitch to a new place. You know, in Code Red, he's with his family. He's, you know, he's a changed man. And you inserting another author into that stage, you not only have to deal with that, but then you also have to take into all the implications of the history that Vince built. And I could see how that would be a challenging next step, you know, and in a sense, that almost kind of sets you up for a little bit more failure where like you could completely fall flat where like you're going to piss off not only Vince Flynn fans, but you're going to piss off people that liked what Kyle Mills did, you know, and we don't know where he's going to go in the future. But I think choosing to go here and not having to grapple with a lot of the stuff that Kyle did and just focusing on, all right, I'm taking this up from Vince essentially. And like you said, picking a point in time where we have no context for what Irene, Mitch, Mike Nash, Stan were doing during this time. And it's an obvious question to think, well, of course, like the CIA played a role in this. So,
right.
what would they be doing? And I think you said it perfectly in the sense that Don does a great job at connecting to like past events. I think like some of the great like part of it, like the epilogue and
Yes.
getting, the connection between Mitch and Irene and addressing, the elephant in the room that is her capture and how she's having these panic attacks. I think it's beautiful and it's great. Like unexperienced author wouldn't have that in there. And I think that takes it to the next level. I think
Well,
also the second point is Mike Nash essentially seeding more nuggets to further explain what Mike Nash's ultimate future is. We're getting like even more foreshadowing, building upon this. We're just in Mike Nash's new role, and we're seeing how he's fumbling, and how we're in Irene's mind and seeing like, oh, did I make the right choice? He's going to have to be. He can't be acting like this if he's going to be doing this, and then seeing how he's resentful towards Rap, and various instances where he wishes he wasn't the politician he was, running out the door with Rap to go capture Crankshaft.
Yeah.
And then your third point, I was really worried about, because we got the tagline right where it's like we knew Ashani was going to play a role, but we also knew that obviously Crankshaft and Bin Laden was going to play a big role. And I'm like, how the hell are these two going to connect?
Right, exactly.
And I was really worried, like you said, Mitch, that he's going to put Mitch to save the day, change the story. It's not this SEAL night, like I love the movie Zero Dark 30. I love like, seeing all that happen. And I 100% agree with you that middle portion where we're in Abbottabad with Noreen, with Mitch, like that, it wasn't clicking for me.
Yeah.
And then Don again does a 180. And we get to the ending, and the ultimate ending is, like you said, Mitch being this shadow force that saves the day in a different way.
Yep.
It was freaking brilliant, man.
Yep.
Like I thought that was the best way to do it.
Yep.
It makes perfect sense. It's fully in character with everybody. So I think those three things: the connection with Irene and Mitch, getting the Mike Nash story right, and then also perfectly playing how Mitch plays a role in this, knocked it out of the park, dude.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that dawned on me, what you just said, when we were recording part one, and I still didn't get it. Halfway through this book, I'm like, okay, the Iranians have this scary missile thing. They could shoot down our choppers. I get why Irene and Mitch would be upset about this, and it upsets the apple cart. And oh my God, big problem. We got to stop it. And then all of a sudden something clicked, and I go, oh my God, the Bin Laden raid.
Right.
I was like, choppers at nighttime. I was like, holy cow. And the second that clicked for me, maybe I'm just slow, and for most people, when they heard about it, it clicked right away. But I was like, this is the perfect way to get Mitch on the ground, like you said, to save the day at the last minute, the 11th hour. Meanwhile, we should also talk, Scott Coleman and team are trying to track down the missiles, and they do successfully. They have their own op where they have to, convince this regiment at Jalalabad to basically team up with them and give them the air support and fly them in and do recon trying to find these trucks in this caravan. I'm like, is this a bit of a side story? I want to see Scott with Rap. I want to see them operating together. But it wasn't a side story because they stopped the caravan, but 2 missiles were missing. And we know Ruintan is still on the loose. He's a pretty good villain in the end. He's still on the loose. And so it all just kind of started connecting as we were reading. And you're right to talk about whether it's Irene or Mike Nash or even Rap himself, all of the characters, Don got right. He did his research on who they are. I mean, just listen to this description here of Rap, and like it would be very easy to get Rap wrong and kind of make him the super killer, and all the stuff that he wrote about with Matt Drake going through PTSD and stuff. It's like you could have put your own spin on Rap and wanted to make Rap your own, and instead I think he really doubled down and said, I'm going to make Rap who Vince made him and knew he was. And look at what he says. Quote, what made Rap unique wasn't just his skill at waging death. It was that it didn't morally or psychologically stain him. Rap slept soundly at night, not because he was a psychopath, but because he believed in the absolute righteousness of his cause. and the undeniable depravity of those he hunted. Rapp never killed a man who didn't deserve to die, any more than he allowed a threat to his nation to continue to draw breath until now. It's like, that's the Rapp. That's the definition, the description we would want of Rapp. And then the Irene Kennedy, I've actually talked to a couple people, and few were of the opinion, this is not Irene. She's trembling. She's shaking. One of the chiefs, touches her, and she's like broken about it. And then on the op, she has to remind herself, I have to make important decisions. I can't have a panic attack now. Well, no, protect and defend just happened. And
Exactly.
let's be reasonable. And Rapp has to be the one to steady her at the end. So you get Irene right. And then Nash. Nash had his moment. He was playing diplomat. He was going to this meeting. He was trying to, ruffle feathers, but he was making some missteps. He has to be the one to get the brush pass handoff when he's taken on that art gallery, that tour in the building to the art gallery. So he has to kind of put on his spy, not an operator's spy kind of persona, but a diplomat who can still be in the espionage game and still pass along the information you need to pass on. And then I love how he's drawn into an op with the airplane scene.
Yes.
Because, dude, we're going to have to spend some time. If Noreen's role kind of faltered in the Abbottabad complex, her role was amazing when they tracked down that airport security guy who she had to shake down for the uniforms and the badges. And then eventually when she had to storm the plane and get the pilots out of the way so Rapp can do his thing. What an amazing scene with those planes taxiing and blocking the runway so they can't, extradite Ashani. It's amazing. And what made it even better was Rapp had to kind of coordinate with Nash and talk to him. And Nash kind of got his feet wet. And even though Noreen died, Rapp and Nash had to have this moment of like, remember, you're an operator. You had to stay in the game. And Nash compartmentalized her dying, even though she was basically his asset, or his officer, I should say, who he was running, and he should feel really responsible for. That also, we didn't see it on page. That also is going to lead to his demise. Once it registers, Noreen died on his watch. Mitch even says to Mike, you did a good job. But Mitch didn't want to say it. Like, he wasn't going to just say, good job, Mike. Mitch had to say it because he realized Nash was fragile.
Yeah.
And Nash didn't even receive that well. Nash was like, oh, it feels great to know that Mitch is telling me good job. But he's like, I don't need to hear that shit. It was just it was a very awkward Mitch trying to be polite and like, I know you're Mr. Suit now, but I'm going to tell you good job on getting your hands dirty to clean up the plane and, contact Irene and pass everything on. And it was just very awkward. And that, I think, definitely indicates how Mike is struggling to forgive Rapp. He's struggling to be out of the game. And this role is really psychologically doing a number on him.
Yeah.
He got it all right. Don got it all right.
No, I think it's, I think it's also a useful tool of Ashani.
Yes.
We always wondered, like, what the hell happened to Ashani? Now we know, like, he got the sickness. Makes sense from being in the Isfahan facility. I love, like, bringing it back to that. And even bringing it back to this sense of, oh, there's people out there that, Rapp didn't kill. Obviously, he got, the top players, but there are some other people that were still involved that he thought he had sent a message. And, there's things that were mentioned in passing in The Last Man but Vince just decided not to, fully dive deep into these. And it's interesting to go back to these certain things. And of course, like if this was a TV show, they would have 100% dive into Irene's mental stability
for sure
post being captured. Like that's just, that's bait. That's like the kibble, like, they just eat it up all day. So anyone that's out there saying that this is not Irene, I think, doesn't understand. And I think that's what he does well, what Don does well. And what we've definitely had picked up as a positive thing in his other novels is this idea to connect with things like PTSD, things like trauma, that kind of stuff.
A quote about that, actually, because that also speaks to, I think, what we needed Don to bring to this series, which we already said in part one is the military expertise, as a helicopter pilot. Dude, he definitely inserts himself in that background here. Very well, though.
I will say, like, there was times where I'm reading it, maybe just because I knew those kind of took me out of it a little bit. I loved it, but I
Yeah.
could definitely see him shifting more to his voice than like trying to meld
Sure.
with Vince's voice. But obviously, he's an author. He's gonna
Yeah.
do that. So
And we hashed that out in part one when we said the military talk was a little heavy, the radio chatter was a little heavy, the code
every time he
names
brings up an Apache pilot, you know he does it because that's what he did. So
he ended a chapter at one point where Mitch is saying, "Thank God for helicopter pilots" or
yeah,
something
exactly,
like that.
exactly.
So we already said maybe a little heavy-handed, but ultimately it's good for the series to have a little more of that military jargon thrown in. But
because it was cool. Most of the
and it was cool.
interactions
Yeah.
with the helicopters, the action sequences with the helicopters, with the military, they're awesome. So,
Yeah.
like,
whether it's Stan jumping off the helicopter
Yeah.
while it's still hovering, like
if they fell flat, if
exactly.
they weren't interesting, then I'm like, well, why did you put this in here? But
It'd be like, dude, what are you doing? Same thing with Will Bentley, him putting his son on Scott Coleman's team. I don't know if I explicitly said this in part one, but I kind of had this reservation of like, you got to earn that shit, man. Like, it's your first book. You got to earn that shit. This is not
He
your
also
series.
puts a Connor Sullivan in there.
Connor Sullivan, a fellow author, probably a friend, I'm guessing. My first reaction to those was one of hesitation. I was like, dude, it's not your universe. And the way I think of it is you're the steward. You are the caretaker of what Vince made. You can't really jump right in and put yourself in that much. But he did it well. It was tasteful. I thought Will was a great character, great addition.
I liked him too. So
I want to know why he's not around. So I do think
exactly.
if Don gives us more in the future, it should address that. And he did earn it. My first reaction was, dude, you can't do that. You got to earn putting your own kid in the book. And then I'm like, nah, you know what? He's the fucking author. You know what? Just go for it, dude. And he did it well. And it was a lot of fun with Scott. We talked about that part one, the whole rescue operation for the Ranger. Perfectly done. So I'm okay with it. But I was going to say, Don's approach with the military stuff also takes on a deeper level, like you were saying, emotionally, the way he works in PTSD for Nash and Irene and these signs. And the epilogue, how Mitch and Irene have to have that conversation. And no one better than Mitch to know how someone in a high stress position like that has to deal with grief. So I thought that was perfect. And to set it with Tommy's lacrosse game.
Yeah, and he brings up Anna.
He brings up Anna. He talks about him processing, because this is the stage of the series where he's basically done processing, where Rapp has gotten back in the game. Extreme measures really, I think, made him wake up and say, America's going to get hit if guys like me are not at the top of their game. So he's back. Mitch is back. But you're still able to bring it up to help a colleague and a friend in Irene, even if it's not affecting Mitch during the story. Like, Mitch during the story doesn't have to wallow in his grief and go, I don't know if I could do this. No, but he has to tell Irene, look, I know what you're going through. I'm here for you. But
I love that he says, I failed them.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to fail you. That was a powerful quote.
Yeah.
And I loved how it dives deep in. I feel like it strengthens Irene and Mitch's relationship. That one sentence. It was. I listened to that at the end, read it at the end, and I was like, wow, that's powerful, man.
That was a great conversation, and that drives Rapp from his very origins. He not felt responsible, but he wanted that revenge or that retribution for Maureen's death. With the Lockerbie bombing, he almost is like, I am not going to stop. Failure is not an option. I'm not going to let them do this again. And over his career, the terrorists keep doing it again. And we just get to see Mitch's response to that here. But I was going to say the soldier's take is shown in that depth of emotion and on the reflection of what was it all for. That's brought up really well with Scott during an op where he's thinking like, what the hell are we still doing here in Afghanistan? And he connects it to Vietnam. And we know that Don, the favorite thing that we've read of his absolute best writing, even beyond Capture or Kill, to me, is Forgotten War.
Yes.
It's his treatise.
If you haven't had a chance to go listen to our pod on Forgotten War, go listen to it.
And read the book. What is it, the fourth Matt Drake book or third Matt Drake book? It's one of the best books we've read this year, maybe on the pod period. And it's a tribute to the men and women who gave their lives in Afghanistan. And it's almost a lament of what happened with the withdrawal from someone who was very personally connected to that conflict. Well, he gets to write that for Scott Coleman. And Scott Coleman is sometimes one-dimensional. And we need Scott Coleman to be one-dimensional. And he just
He's
has
that
to be the
pillar,
jokester.
almost. Yeah.
He's the pillar. He's just going to do the op. He's going to crack some jokes, but he's going to be no nonsense to get the job done. And Irene leans on him. But we're given this very quick moment where he's saying, what the hell are we still doing here? And he connects it to Vietnam with this, quote, Coleman was nowhere near old enough to have experienced Vietnam. But as young frogman, he'd known several senior chiefs who had. While he hadn't doubted their observations on what it was like to serve in the long, unpopular, and ultimately unsuccessful war, Coleman had never been able to come to terms with the conflict's outcome. How could America piss away the lives of 55,000 of her sons and daughters over 7 bloody years and still settle for defeat? It had never made sense to him then. It was starting to now. That's a great reflection for Scott Coleman to have. It's quick, it's deep, but then Scott goes back to being Scott. But on the back of his mind is like, is this very similar to Vietnam? And we know Don's thoughts on that from Forgotten War. He drew a lot of parallels, and that book was powerful. I love to see Scott going through that. It gives the depth to someone actually in the military on the ground, like a Scott Coleman, who maybe we haven't seen that depth from before.
Yeah, 100%. And
It's a good
there's
touch.
also this other interaction between Scott and Mitch. And in my mind, for some reason, I just imagine like them sitting outside of like a bee hut on Imfob Fenty, and Mitch is just like looking out into the desert, and he says, I think we're going to lose. I think we're going to lose this.
That's right.
And he's like, what, the Ranger? And then Mitch's answer is, no, the whole war.
The whole thing.
Like, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, and that was, it's obviously, you know, now that we did kind of, you know, ultimately it was unsuccessful. Like, we pulled out and Taliban came back in, and now Afghanistan is what it is. So it's just that deep reflection. I think only a Don Bentley could add that, you know, maybe even a Jack Carr could add something like that to it, because they've been through it. It's personal. And I think that's what Don brings to the series. That's what I like to see. And so I hope to see a lot more going forward. Yeah. Got to get kudos to that.
So we talked about a few things that Don brought to the series that clearly shows his own spin.
Yeah.
But can we talk about something that shows he absolutely gets Vince Flynn? Rapp knocks out the Department of Agriculture guy.
Oh yeah, that's a total Mitch Rapp in character, 100%.
That's old school Rapp. That is just old school Rapp right there. It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's like Captain Leland in I think Extreme Measures when he hurts that guy.
There's plenty of
times. Rapp on the Hill. How many times at Capitol Hill is he mouthing off at these politicians? And now it's a Department of Agriculture weenie, I think he calls him, who's in charge of the redevelopment plan or the end of war.
It's right after that interaction. That's where he's talking to Scott and says, I think we're going to lose this. Yeah.
Yep. And I think Scott pulls him away from the conflict. I think Scott's the one he's chilling with or gets him out of there.
So speaking of like getting things right, bringing in the past, you know, there's a lot. Don does a good job of mentioning a lot of like instances from the series. You know, we get a hint to when he was captured by the Hezbollah, a la American Assassin. We get a like, oh, that was the guy who saved the United States from a nuke. Memorial Day.
Yep.
We even get like a bunch of references where he flat out inserts book titles, like, you know, Extreme Measures, Protect and Defend. You know, like you just. I mean, it's easy to do, but, you know, it was nice to see, and I definitely picked up on that. You know, we get some heavy characters later on in this book, a la a Marcus, a la a Stan Hurley, and
you're winding me up, Chris. You're winding me up.
So I know what you're going to say. I was highly disappointed when I heard Steven Weber say Marcus Dumond, but I will caveat that by saying, What was the one thing we said needed to be in this book?
Well, we wanted a Marcus. I wanted a Marcus mention.
We needed a Marcus mention. We got that. I will say check. 2, I think Marcus's role in this.
Throwaway.
Really?
Absolute throwaway.
I 100% disagree. I think it makes sense. Obviously, he calls him to do something. He can't do it because they're messing up the signals. Right. And then it's a way to not ignore the character. Now, I want to ask you, if they had gotten his last name right, would you still be upset? Like
Oh,
that?
I'd be way less upset. Okay, let me just lay this out for the folks. What is
That
triggering
is a big.
Let me lay this out.
It's a big problem that they
It's
got
a
his
big
name
problem.
wrong. But I want to know.
I might call it an unforgivable problem.
I want to know who let that slip, though. Who let that slip?
If there is not a press release published on the Vince Flynn website, sent out to the followers on their email listserv, if it is not a press release on letterhead from somebody taking the blame, this is like the Secret Service with the assassination attempt. If they don't take the blame, we're going to drag them to the hill. We're going to put them through the Inquisition, because let me tell you, this one is so bad for that. Not only, and like I said, I'm not going to blame this on Don. Not to be in the first draft, whatever. You spell names wrong, and actually,
yeah, but it was in the hard copy,
dude. The arc. So I'm reading the arc, and it pissed me off when I saw that. But in my mind, I just go, "That's fine. It's like one of the first drafts. I'm sure they rushed this thing because they wanted the ambassadors to have fun with that. No problem." So the arc had a ton of mistakes. I don't fault anybody for that. That's how a first draft goes, I'm sure. But the big mistake, to spell Marcus's name wrong, Marcus Drummond, not Marcus Dumond. And I went through Kindle. I opened up every book in the series. I did a search for Drummond, Drummond. Do you know how many hits I got published in the Mitrap universe for Marcus Drummond? 0, Chris. I got 0 hits. You know why? Because it's not his fucking name. It's Marcus Dumond. And it's been Marcus Dumond. And we know, Chris, you wound me up. I'm not going to stop right now. I hope I don't wake the baby. Vince and his dyslexia, there were a few things where he changed the names, right?
He did.
Was it,
that's what I was going to push back on. I was going to push back on
Anna Riley. So if Don is playing some 8D chess, not 3D chess, not 4D chess, 8D chess, to spell Marcus's name wrong as a tribute to Anna Riley versus Anna Riley, because Vince spelled it one way and Kyle spelled it the other, I will absolutely eat my hat. This hat I'm wearing right here, I will eat it. I will digest it. I will cut it into small pieces and wash it down with pink lemonade. But if that was not an intentional move to honor the Anna Riley thing, if it was just a fuck up, someone needs to take the blame. We need a press release, because you put it in a first draft, no problem. You publish it in an arc, minor problem. I went to my hardcover copy the day it was mailed to me just to check if Marcus Dumond's name was fixed. It was not fixed in the hardcover. I then said, okay, wait, you know what? Pub day. Let's wait for pub day. Let's see if some people in the stores who actually pick up a copy. No, they said the same thing. People bought it in the store. Still spelled wrong.
And
if this was just an oversight, the audiobook, did you catch it?
Yeah, I did. I was waiting for it.
Steven Weber said Drummond. The script that he got said Drummond. How many layers did that get through to not be flagged? You just bring in one person, a Ryan Steck, a Kyle Mills, anybody, just give a brief overview. 99% of people who are actually trying to do this right and edit would have caught it, and it would have been changed. How many people did this book go through to get to that point? I might be being harsh, but don't tell me one of the biggest series in fiction literature, one of the biggest books that's going to be a top seller no matter what, has not been gone through with it. It just shows there's something going on with this series that I hope this isn't writing on the wall, that someone's like, this series isn't as important, or let's not give it as close a look as it deserves. I just hope this isn't slipping down the pecking order. Now that Vince is gone, now that Kyle's gone, that's like, we're just going to get this one to print willy-nilly, doesn't matter. This is the one you should go word by word, because the ambassadors do. People like us do. Our followers do. We go word by word to make sure this thing is perfect. And I need them to do the same. I need the editing team, whoever's fault this was, to do the same and tell us why this happened.
So agreed. But I think that because of this, it has to be intentional. It has to be intentional, and don't know why. The only thing I can think of was the exact same thing I thought of with the Anna Riley, the Anna Riley, the nod to Vince in a sense.
That'd be great. If it's true, it'd be great. But
yeah,
I need it in writing. I need it on letterhead. I'm sorry.
It's way more damning if it's not that. You know what I mean? If it's just it's oversight.
And I know I'm being harsh. Mistakes happen, and mistakes are fine. But to get to this level, to be published, the arc, it wouldn't have bothered me as much. I saw it, I was like, okay, probably a mistake, whatever, late night. To go this far, though, Chris, it's so disheartening. It really is.
That's what I it has to be intentional, bro. It has to be. Has to be.
Well, you want to know something else? We will never get to find out on this podcast directly from the man himself. Unfortunately, guys, little announcement here. Don Bentley is not going to make it on our podcast. We don't know if he's unable or unwilling, or we're not sure what the confusion or reasoning may be. We have asked. We were open and said, if there's anything we can do or talk about or discuss, we are open to it. But we'll just leave it at that. Don Bentley has informed us he will not be appearing on our show. So maybe because I do rants like that. Sorry, Chris. My fault.
Potentially, maybe. So we won't get to ask him. Maybe in a year. We'll let it settle. Maybe next year he'll want to come on the pod. But for now, all you got is us, guys. All you got is us.
One other person I think I've burned some bridges with who won't be on this pod. I assume we don't know for sure, but you said his name, Steven Weber.
You burned some bridges. Yeah, you definitely burned some bridges with Steven.
I've burned some bridges there in the past, and I'll just say better. Is it progress?
So I wanted to talk about this. I think it definitely better than Code Red. I think we're holding him, and we said this before. We're holding him to a very high standard. Comparing him to George Waddell, the voice of Mitch Rapp, the voice of a lot of good series. So obviously they made a conscious decision last time around to pivot, whether that's not to piss off, we went over this all last year with Code Red, whether it was to not make too many changes because they knew that Don was coming, or it could be something simple as contract negotiations. George wanted more money. I
think he's just retiring / cutting back on the amount of books he does. But
we have no idea.
We don't know.
So, and this is a guy who lends his voice to a lot of different novels. We like to think that he has a special place in his heart for reading Vince Flynn. The guy could not care. We don't know. I mean, we've obviously talked to him about it, but we really don't know the ins and outs of the business. But I will say, I've listened to Steven Weber now with another series. If you haven't gone and checked out our No Limits pods on TJ Newman's books,
he's great.
He's great.
He's great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Did a really good job with Falling and Drowning. This time around, I liked him more, but there's certain things that I'm just, I don't know. I don't know if I can ever get over the fact. And I think, another character I wanted to talk about was Stan. I think,
yeah,
I didn't love Steven's take on Stan, but I thought that Don's take on Stan was great. I agree. And it kind of like I'm happy that I read it first. I had to read it first because I had the arc before, we were planning to pod before the audiobook came out. And then I listened to, you had warned me about that. There's going to be a character that you're not going to like Steven Weber's a take on it. And as soon as he came in, I was like, oh, Stan. Yeah. But I thought it was a great nod bringing Stan in, just like I thought it was a good nod bringing in Marcus. I thought that we needed those two characters in this story for sure.
Yeah, we needed them in the story. I think both could have maybe be integrated more fully, but Stan's integration here is really good, and he plays such a key role in that final sequence. I really do love it as well. I gotta say, I do. I won't call it unforgivable, but Steven Weber's voice for Stan is just, it's pitiful. It just falls short.
Just skip, read the ending if you're listening to the audiobook. I got
it. Yeah. I got angry enough tonight. I'm not going to get into that one. I will just say underwhelming, disappointing. I wanted Stan to be gruff and tough and this even just a smoker's voice or just something that makes
George
Stan
gets it right with that smoker's voice.
This one just didn't stand. And it was in the heat of the moment too. There was one other thing that bothered me about the audiobook rendition. He was very, very flatlined. And that happens in a lot of series with narration, even a thrilling, espionage, military thriller. The narrator still has to be kind of even keel. And so I get that. But Steven Weber on two particular occasions broke from that and put a whole lot of emphasis in his voice, and one was like a grunting sound. And the reason was because the text said, quote, 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 close quote, grunted rap. And just because it said grunted rap instead of like rap said, because it said grunted, that was the one line Steven Weber put this like grunt emphasis on. He read that one particular line with that emotion. He emoted that. You only put the emotion in just because of those two things. It sounded so weird when he started reading with this emotion, when everything else in the book is flatline, even a thrilling scene, saving the seal out of the water. The waterfall is dripping, the gurgling, they're underwater, they're holding their breath. This guy can't swim. He pops up. Oh my God, you're a ranger. You're a seal. Don't save me. Like the heat of the moment, and all that was monotone. It was just even keel monotone, no excitement in his voice. But then to randomly put excitement in his voice for no really good reason other than somebody was grunting in that particular scene or out of breath. I think it was it was Stan running. He gets out of the helicopter. He's running like across the field or something.
Yeah, and Steven puts in this like
and he's panting. Yeah, that's it. He was panting. And there were so many other scenes where if you were going to do that, you could have done that. But you just did it for this one. Very strange. Anyway, dude, a line like this, Don putting Stan in with this line is perfect. Stan Hurley appeared in a cloud of cigarette smoke as if he were the devil newly summoned from the gates of hell.
I love
That's
that.
what Stan deserves. Stan deserves that kind of writing.
Well, and I like, because I guess the last time we saw Stan was old Stan. He's had cancer. I liked getting one last shot of seeing, Stan in action. Harken us back to an American Assassin or a Kill Shot, like that kind of era. So, yeah, I highly enjoyed Stan's reintroduction into the series.
Yeah, completely agree. You have anything else on the good guys then? Because we haven't spent that much time on the villains, and before we really scorecard the whole thing, I do think deserves to have a little conversation about Ruintan, Damian Moradi, Ashani's kind of second in command kind of guy. What did you think about those two characters, or anybody else who you would consider or classify the bad guys here?
I thought Ruintan was interesting. He's definitely not like my favorite bad guy of the series. I don't know. He kind of gets like played by Ashani, and this Moradi character is obviously sympathetic with Ashani, and like ultimately at the end, we find out that Moradi reinstigates or reconnects with Irene to make this back channel that she had with Ashani. So I don't know. I know some of our listeners rank the bad guys pretty low in this novel.
Yeah,
we don't see a lot of them. He's obviously like just this big, and obviously Crankshaft is like this big bad, but we never actually see him.
And those two brothers in the complex, like okay. When Rap was playing Meter Maid.
So it's interesting. I gave the arc to another big fan, and I only see him really once a week at church, and so he gave it back to me this past Sunday, and I was like, "Oh, so what'd you think?" He's like, "I loved it, but I was waiting for them to like another shoe to drop with like this, because they set it up great with this scene at the Isfahan facility, fire. There's fire. It's night. Like he wanted it more than just be like some modified missiles." I don't think he quite appreciated what we said, like in terms of like that kind of brought it all full circle with like how they could potentially attack the SEALs, to Crankshaft. Now, like I think that ultimately that whole fits, but I could appreciate how you would feel like, oh, in a sense, like the two halves of the story kind of don't go together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, my take on that, I have a two-part take on that. One is, I thought you were going to say his disappointment was not enough Ashani, because
I definitely wanted more Ashani.
Such a good character, such a good way to bring him back. We know he has this back channel with Irene, but we also know he has a very important job in the MOIS and Iranian security and intelligence. I think we could have done so much with him, and it fell short. Thankfully, the airplane scene with his death and him willing to pass on the Abbottabad information, like him willing to spill the beans about bin Laden, that's big, right? So that's big enough for in the heat of the moment on the tarmac to save Ashani's role here. But somewhere in the middle, I wanted more about the missing meat. We left out on part one really wondering what's going to happen now that Ashani where Rap stood him up, that Ashani thought he was stood up. And I love the airport scene where he wants to fly to France, be with his family, but he can't do that until he has assurances from the Americans, because he knows Rap is a man of his word. He knows if he gives the intel and makes a deal that Rap will protect his family, that will actually happen. And he can die of cancer, no problem, because he knows his family's taken care of. But he doesn't get the chance to have that face to face. And instead, his only play is to go stay undercover, if you will, with Ruintan, pretend he's still doing his job, go to Pakistan, the security meet. And that's where he meets Mike Nash, or wants to meet Mike Nash. It got murky there. It was kind of that handoff from Ashani to Marathi, where I was kind of losing track of things. It checks out in the end, but I wanted Ashani to be more hands-on. Some sort of communication with Mitch, even if it wasn't face-to-face, to address that. But it was Marathi who had to come to the hotel room. And another thing is that scene on the overlook. It was like a national park or something overlooking, was it Tehran? I don't remember where they were exactly. But Marathi is out there contemplating, like, I'm trying to help Ashani, so we're going to be kind of on the American side, and that what's best for our country is if they are not against us. We drop the sanctions, we have a détente. But at the same time, Ruintan is on to us, so I have to blame Ashani. He kind of did the only thing he could have done, throw Ashani under the bus to protect his cover. And then he's still willing to meet with Mike Nash to spill the beans once Ashani is taken, but he had to kind of throw Ashani under the bus. And then Ruintan leaves, and Rap just pops up, and he starts hassling the dude.
Yeah,
and he grabs his arm. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, that whole meet on the mountainside was a big miss for me, an absolute big miss. I was like, what is Rap doing here? Why is Marathi still here? Ruintan.
Rap was just in J-Bad, and then boom, he pops up in Islamabad. I mean, I know they're close to each other, but
that was Islamabad where that was, that overlook?
Yeah. No, I think that whole transition from the Ranger rescue to like pivoting to the second half of the book, we've said it before, like that that is the weakest part of the novel.
It was rough.
I think that's what doesn't elevate this to being like a top 5.
Coming off of part 1, I would have said top 10. We were on track for easy top 10. Easy.
But part I do think that the ending saves it, though.
The ending saves it. The ending tries to make that push. It kind of puts it back in the conversation.
It connects everything back together.
But there's something in the middle that, and maybe it was saving the Ranger. I was along for the ride when Rap had to do his fake ambush with Scott Coleman's team and be Farid Saeed and go kind of infiltrating these cells. I love that. And he's saving the Ranger Sexton at the same time. But then on reflection, I'm like, no, he should have met with Ashani. Like, Irene knows that's such an important back channel. And here's the problem. There was at least twice where Rap had to, on page, either say to himself or say out loud, I did the right thing by saving the Ranger instead of meeting Ashani. I don't know if it's that clear cut. It's almost like we're being told, just move on. The audience shouldn't question this. Rap thinks he did the right thing. Everyone's saying Rap did the right thing. So don't even question that decision. I don't know about that. The Ashani meet to get the intel, I think that's something Irene would have prioritized. And I think Irene and Rap would have had a little bit more. I like their conversations in the book, but I think there would have been a little more push back on that, a little tug of war between them. And just for Rap to come out and say, I did the right thing, it kind of like force fed the audience just to agree. And I didn't appreciate that. I thought that could have had a deeper consequences to missing the Ashani meet instead of just, well, at least I saved that Ranger guy.
Yeah, it's like, I don't want to discount the whole Ranger sequence because obviously I guess it makes sense because the HIG play a role in,
and the Iranian is there,
the missiles and the
who
Iranians,
tips off Riantan.
So I guess, it all connects, right?
It does.
But you could look back on it and say that whole excursion was unnecessary. Like it is kind of put in just to have Rap and Mark and Scott, showcase their capabilities. So it's like, I don't know. He obviously, that's how he structured his story. You have to take the whole thing together. I think like if you stop at certain points, then you obviously get different takes. So yeah, it's interesting. But like, I guess if we want to dive into the scorecard, like if I was to rate the bad guys, I don't know. Rintan is not super intriguing to me. Like, he
No.
gets played hardcore by Ashani. I like that he gets played by Ashani. I wanted to see, like you said, I think we could have used more Ashani. I think we could have used like more, okay, I'm now a traitor. Like, how am I going to deal with this? You know?
Yeah.
And then even like seeing him, like, how would he, because we never saw the interaction between him and Rwintan. Like,
No.
he just gets captured, right?
Yeah.
You know, like maybe him trying to get out of that, like his conversations with, you know, so I honestly think the Marathi character could have been eliminated completely.
You either eliminate Marathi or you clarify who he is, what his role is. I mean, if Ashani is taken by Rwintan, I would have rather Ashani tipped off Nash or Rap in a very like back channel-y kind of way. Like he used some sort of like fourth deputy minister of, you know, some sort of Ministry of Culture who reaches out to like our third level somebody at CIA, and we watch that going up the rungs to get to
Right.
Irene, and then Irene sends Nash over and says, you got to find this guy Marathi and meet with him. I like there's something could have been clarified about Marathi's role, which elevated Ashani, which downplayed that confusion, because Mitch comes in and just twists his arm on the mountainside.
Yeah, and gets the information.
He just starts beating on the dude. I'm like, it was so out of place and out of character. And then in the end, Marathi's all scared of Rap, and they're like, no, we got to trust him. He's going to be our new Ashani. The whole thing could have been clarified. So that's a minor ding, yeah, if we get the scorecard. But do you mind, Chris? We talked a lot tonight. I have to digest a few things, possibly cool my jets on a few things. I want to get the scorecard right, and I am not settled on rankings. So if we do a scorecard, that kind of solidifies where we rank the book numbers-wise, and we'd have to then say, does it crack the top 10? I'm not totally ready to make that call tonight.
Okay.
Do we get a part 3?
I think that's a good call.
We have a lot to say about the cover, and I don't want to have to squeeze that in.
Yes.
Between cover, rankings, the title, capture or kill, I feel like there's a little bit more I want to say, and I don't know where I'm settled yet on this book.
Yeah, let's table it. Let's digest. Maybe we can see if we can get someone else to come in and help us with the scorecard.
Yeah, I think we'd have to get some super fans, maybe a couple of ambassadors, get their opinions, and then bring someone on the show. I think that'd be great. Another outside voice who can help us dig into the book.
Has Brian Costello read this book? Because we talked to him when we found out that Don was taking over. So
that's right. That's a great point. We should reconnect with him. It's been a while. Good call. We'll bring somebody on. We'll do a scorecard. We'll do some rankings. We'll do a limerick. Yeah, we'll do a limerick, and we'll do the cover. Coming to you in part 3.
Yeah, no, we have plenty of meat left on this capture kill balance. So
a lot to say. Still very high on the book. Part 2 kind of didn't ride as high as part 1 for me, but there were some amazing epic moves, from the helicopter scene to bringing in Stan to Irene and Mitch at the lacrosse game, Tommy's lacrosse game. There were some really good, brilliant, genius moves with this plot and with these characters. So hats off.
Yeah, I think like, whereas part 1, I was high on it from start to finish. This one,
up and down.
I wavered at times.
Yeah,
but ultimately at the end, it shot to the moon.
It really hit. It really hit. Man, that airplane scene on the tarmac. Woo. Oh, Chris, can you promise me one thing?
Yes. We're
going to end this episode. Last episode, you gave us a let Mitch be Mitch. Can you please give me a let Marcus be Marcus? Please.
All right. For you. For Marcus Dumond.
Yes.
For Marcus Dumond. I'll give it to you. Okay.
All right.
Before that.
Appreciate that.
We got to thank our patrons. Our deputy director, Sherry F. Shout out Sherry. Her love for George never died.
I love Sherry. Yep.
Our special operator, Jason C. Our special agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Peggy, Mark, and Chris. Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of Thriller Podcast. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram. We're back on the Instas at Thriller Podcast.
Oh, can we add a patron? Mike. We got Mike S., also a special agent on the Patreon. Shout out, Mike. Love talking to you on the group chat as well.
And as always, just let Marcus be Marcus.